If you hear the name Niger anywhere, nothing else will probably come to your mind except that it is a poor country somewhere in Africa, one of the many forgotten countries in our plundered and oppressed continent. Some of us may also confuse it with Nigeria, and many of us may mistake its location on the map. This is the normal forgotten countries. As I said, for most of us, except for our loved ones in the Maghreb countries, maybe because we are neighbors, of course. However, these countries are perhaps the most important countries on the continent, and the most important of them is Niger, whose area is almost 1.3 times the size of Egypt, and more than 98 of its population is Muslim. Okay, why is Niger important? Even though it is unfortunately the third poorest country in the world after South Sudan and Chad, and despite its extremely harsh climate and its land that suffers periodically from drought and desertification, it has enormous natural resources. It floats on entire treasures, as we will explain in a while. Less than 3 weeks ago, on the 26th of last July, Niger got back on the map again and has become the focus of attention for most, if not all, of the population of the Arab world, and even the entire world, with no exaggeration. What happened? We woke up and discovered that General Abdurrahman Chiani, commander of the Presidential Guard, had turned against the president of Niger and France's strong ally, Mohamed Bazoum, and ousted him from power in the midst of escalating tensions and general popular discontent with French colonial practices in the country. That is why the first thing the demonstrators supporting the coup did was to march to the French embassy in a massive protest against France's political and military presence in Niger and its theft of the country's natural resources, especially uranium. However, France's crimes are not limited only to the theft of Niger's natural resources, but rather to a major disaster that it left to our people in Niger: radioactive waste. So what exactly is happening in Niger? And what catastrophe did France cause in one of the largest uranium mines in the world there? How did Niger come to be floating on a sea of radioactive waste? These are the important and serious questions that we will try to answer in today's episode, which you must watch until the end. This is Niger. It has some of the poorest people on Earth. Destitute people who struggle daily to secure food and find clean water to drink. 42 of the country's population lives in extreme poverty, and 60 of them suffer from something called multi-deprivation, which means that they are deprived of health and educational services, water, sanitation, humane housing conditions, and the ability to own a house, when even if they find one, it won't have electricity or any other amenity. All this despite the fact that Niger has enormous natural resources, mainly uranium and gold. Niger is the 7th largest producer of uranium in the world, but one sole country is almost entirely in control of uranium extraction operations and takes it cheaply. That country, of course, is France. The wealth of the Nigerian people is the one that lights up the homes of the French, warms them, and operates their factories. If you think that I am exaggerating, it is enough to know that out of every 4 lamps in France, 3 are lit by Niger's uranium, because this uranium fuels its nuclear reactors, which are responsible for generating 70% of French electricity. Uranium is one of the most important and dangerous natural elements in the world. After extraction, it goes through stages in order to get concentrated uranium oxide from it, which is a yellow powder that is kept in barrels and has low radioactivity. It is most commonly known as yellow cake and is used after being processed again in the manufacture of fuel for nuclear reactors. Uranium in general can also be used in the production of hydrogen bombs and nuclear weapons, in radiation therapy for some types of cancer, as ballast for some ships to maintain their balance, and for some types of aircraft as well, and also in some types of ammunition and shields, such as tank. The price of uranium oxide or yellow cake in the global market on the 30th of July was $56, 23 cents per pound, which means that a kilogram costs approximately $130. If we look at the map of global uranium production in 2022, we will find that Kazakhstan has the largest share of global uranium production, followed by Canada, Namibia, Australia, Uzbekistan, Russia, Niger, and then the rest of the world. Until 2015, Niger was the 4th largest producer of uranium in the world, but production decreased in the following years until it reached 7th place, as you just saw. Its production in 2022 was extracted from only one mine, the Somer mine. This is the only uranium mine currently operating in Niger. This mine is an open-pit mining site near the city of Arlit in the northwest. A company called Somer. This is a company that's 63.4 owned by the French company Orano, with the rest 36.6 owned by Sopamine, a Nigerian governmental company responsible for mining activities in the country. Before we continue, of course, I must quickly tell you who this Orano is. Orano is the French company that controls the uranium mining activities in Niger and holds almost all of the country's reserves in this mineral. Orano was named Arriva before 2018. It is a giant company and one of the largest nuclear fuel production companies in the world, and the majority of it is owned by the French government. In 2021, Orano was the world's third largest uranium producer and accounted for 11% of global production. This company is the arm of France, with which it has been plundering Niger's wealth of uranium for more than 40 years, extracting it cheaply and paying insignificant amounts of money to the governments of Niger, and then sending it to France to operate its nuclear reactors. That is why the coup that took place in Niger and overthrew Mohamed Bazoum and his government was a disaster for the French. Why? Is it because this new regime will be hostile to France forever? In fact, this is not the case. We still do not know what will happen in the future, and we cannot be certain for now, despite the actions of the new Nigerian regime pointing to it being completely hostile to the French presence in Niger, and despite the fact that it prevented the export of uranium and gold to France and cut off diplomatic relations with it. However, the French, in general, are afraid of what may happen and what may affect the continuance of the looting of Niger's uranium, which is an important and main resource for operating the 56 nuclear reactors distributed among their 18 power stations. These French nuclear reactors consume about 8,000 tons of uranium annually. This mighty nuclear arsenal not only generates 70% of the domestic French electricity, but also makes France the largest net source of nuclear energy in the world. This brings in more than 3 billion euros annually. Niger is one of the 3 largest suppliers of uranium to France, and in the last 10 years has been fulfilling about 20 of France's needs. If we go back to the uranium mines in Niger and the role of French uranium men, we will find that there is a second mine still under development, the Niger mine, which contains one of the largest reserves of uranium in the world. This is located about 50 miles south of Arlit. Experts expect that this mine will produce 5,000 tons of uranium deposits annually over the next 35 years. Even though the French company Orano obtained permission to operate the mine in 2009, it stopped working in it in 2014 after the collapse of uranium prices due to the Japanese Fukushima disaster in 2011. If we go to the company's website, we will find it saying that the Imaru Rain Mine will be operational as soon as market conditions allow it. Here we see huge question marks about why successive Nigerian governments did not withdraw the license to operate the mine from Orano, even though it did not extract a single gram of uranium from it in 14 years. What caught my attention more about the company's talk about the mine and its report on mining activities dated September 22 is that the company is still putting the site under research and development in order to assess the feasibility of operating it and extracting uranium from it by different extraction methods. Was behind the French company's few words. The hidden meaning can be found in a report published by the famous intelligence periodical Africa Intelligence in early February, in which it revealed that Orano claims that extracting uranium from there is not economically feasible due to the low prices of the metal today. Of course, this is not true because the prices, as we explained before, are $130 per kilo of uranium, not low prices, as evidenced by the fact that Orano itself made profits in 2020, one of 4.7 billion euros, which is equivalent to $5, 5 cents billion, and the average uranium prices in that year were almost half of the current prices. Okay, so what is the reason behind the French company's allegations? It seems more likely, in my opinion, that the company is procrastinating activating the right to use the mine and extract uranium in order to use a controversial extracting method so that it can reduce costs and thus achieve greater profits. I'm specifically referring to a technique called in situ recovery, or ISA. This is a technique for extracting uranium from the ground without digging and moving tons of soil, as is done traditionally. What is happening here is that they inject an acidic solution into the ground to dissolve the uranium in the sediments, and then they withdraw this liquid to a processing plant and extract the uranium from it. The advantage of this method for mining companies is that it reduces extraction costs. On the other hand, it causes an environmental catastrophe for local landowners because it pollutes the ground and groundwater with uranium, which is a toxic element, as we all know, and has no cure. What the French company Orano is thinking of doing in Niger is not the first bad happening. There's a worse precedent which they actually did. They didn't only think of it. They did it in a third mine in Niger, which was considered one of the largest uranium mines in the world. Out a mine! This is a mine near the mining town of Akokan in southwest Ireland. The mine is owned by Cominac, which is mostly owned by Orano. Orano had been extracting uranium from it since 1978, over the course of 43 years, until it depleted all its ore reserves and decided to close it in March 2020. This mine produced 75,000 tons of uranium in its lifetime. In 2014, Reuters published a shocking report in which it showed documents revealing that the mines controlled by Areva at the time, Orano at present, do not pay export duties on the uranium extracted from the mines, nor do they pay taxes on the materials and equipment that they bring into the country to be used in mining operations. All they pay is a meager 5.5 tax on the uranium produced. This is a simple example illustrating the company's colonial practices. It's as if Niger had not officially gained independence from the French occupation in 1960. However, this is not the disaster. Imagine. The real disaster for our people in Niger was what came next. Focus on me. Well, when a company is working in a uranium mine, what does it do? The traditional method of mining is that the miners remove the topsoil and then dig into the rock until they reach the uranium ore. Yeah, this ore is not concentrated uranium, but they want concentrated uranium, also known as uranium oxide or yellow cake. So what should they do? They put the ore in a mill to break it, and when it breaks, we have two things. Uranium oxide yellow cake, which is what they take in leftovers, which are called what? Radioactive waste! Here's the problem. Normally, the radioactive waste that mining companies leave behind after separating the uranium from the uranium from the uranium from the ore is stored in designated ponds, which are kept locked. However, Orano, from the moment it closed the Akota mine, didn't do that. Do you know how much radioactive waste the company has been leaving for more than 40 years next to this mine? 20 million tons of radioactive waste spread over an area of 296 acres in piles 35 meters high. If we put 176 soccer fields next to each other, the 20 million tons of radioactive waste would cover them completely, and the layer would be several meters high. Can you imagine the size I'm talking about? All of this has been left there for years, discarded, out in the open. The two mining cities, Akokan and Arlit, are home to more than 200,000 people, and the radioactive waste found in the mine site is close to these two cities. The Commission for Independent Research and Information on Radioactivity, known as CRERED, based in France, says that the 20 million tons of radioactive waste that Orano dumped at the mine site produce a radioactive gas known as radon as a result of the natural decomposition of uranium. Radon is a very toxic gas if inhaled in concentrated doses, and it is considered the second most common cause of lung cancer in the United States, after cigarettes. If we talk about smokers, and the number one cause among non-smokers, what happens is that the strong desert winds spread this radioactive dust, and the residents who live around the mine in the two cities inhale it in different amounts. Not only that, but it also pollutes the soil and water. The biggest problem is that this nuclear waste dump is close to agricultural lands, and therefore it can lead to poisoning of the food that the locals consume. The world-renowned environmental organization Greenpeace was allowed to enter the area a few years ago and began conducting tests and research on the quality of soil, water, and air in Akokan and Arlit. Their studies proved that the radiation concentration is about 500 times higher than normal, and they warned that spending 1 hour a day over the course of a year in this location exposes humans to 10 times the annual radiation dose limit. This is the opposite of the statements of Orano officials. By the way, who reassure that radiation levels are normal? Greenpeace also found pieces of radioactive scrap metal being sold at the local market in Arlet. The level of radiation in these metal pieces was 50 times higher than normal. When they analyzed water samples, they found that 4 out of every 5 samples collected from the Arlet area had a higher concentration of uranium than the limit recommended by the World Health Organization. Not only that, but there is no more groundwater there because Orano has used about 270 billion liters of water over more than 40 years of operations inside the mine. So the aquifer that was more than 150 meters deep is now dry. Grazing animals also started to get sick due to the contamination of the pastures with radioactive dust. In short, according to environmental activists, the environmental disaster caused by the French Orano company in the Akota mine area so far could cost billions of dollars. Of course. Orano, as I said, denies all this and claims they did nothing wrong, and the Nigerian people are fine. French nuclear energy engineer Bruno Chereron of the CRIRAD laboratory says that Orano is lying to the public because it says that it measured pollution levels in the water and found nothing while the lab's measurements of the same water show dangerous levels of pollution. Of course, the impact of all this on the health of the population living in the area is clear. The Aguirre Man Association, a local non-profit association in Niger, says that there is an increase in severe disease cases among male and female miners, with the most common being digestive disorders, cancer, infertility, birth defects, miscarriages, and others, and because Orano provides financial support to some hospitals in these mining towns, doctors and hospital administrations cannot say that these diseases, especially lung cancer, are linked to radioactivity. Former Secretary General of the University of Niamey Students' Union Mohamedou Smaila says that patients are often deceived by doctors who tell them that they have HIV AIDS, which is not true because most of these pathological conditions are linked to radioactivity, the natural thing that Orano was supposed to do from the moment it closed. The mine was to secure it and bury the radioactive waste using methods used globally. However, this has not happened until now. Well, soon! Kaminak, a subsidiary of Orano, says it plans to build a container to secure the waste and cover it with a 2-meter layer of mud and rocks to contain the radiation. Of course! The project is costly. It will reach $160 million, and they will spend 10 years working on it before handing over the site to the government of Niger. In addition to the fact that residents have doubts that the company will actually do this because they simply do not trust them, we find that there are other valid fears, such as that the layer with which Orano will cover the waste is likely to fail and develop cracks, especially in the face of the floods that may occur. The idea is that if cracks appear, cancer-causing radon gas will leak out, mix with the water, and reach the entire area during these floods. I conclude here. I don't want to keep you too long. We wish safety to all our people in Niger, and I hope our followers there reassure us in the comments that they are fine. May God make your days less stressful and things stable as soon as possible. As usual, I have a question for you. Do you think that the coup that took place could end the French presence on Nigerian lands once and for all? Or is France's influence there stronger than what happened? I will keep up with your answers in the comments. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel, and if you liked the episode, please hit the like button and share the video. Most importantly, tell your friends and loved ones about us, whether they are Arabs or non-Arab speakers, and get them to know the channel. They may like it. Goodbye. Goodbye.